Between 1626 and 1627, there were around 75 witch trials in Norway, with over 300 people being executed for witchcraft. The Vardø witch trials are the most well-known of these cases and involved the execution of more than 40 people for practicing witchcraft. So what happened in Vardø? What led to such a large number of executions? And what does it tell us about how the authorities dealt with witchcraft during this time period? Join me today as we look at one of the largest witch trials of all time. In the barren lands of northern Norway, amidst the frosty landscapes and dark winter nights, the small fishing village of Vardø was situated. By the early 17th century, Vardø had become a notorious center of trade, drawing merchants from all across northern Europe. However, beneath its veneer of prosperity, a sense of unease and superstition prevailed. With the long cold winters, the villagers' lives were tough and they often found themselves at the mercy of the elements. This harsh environment fostered a deep-rooted belief in the supernatural. When misfortune struck, whether it was an illness, a failed harvest, or a death in the family, the villagers often looked beyond the natural world for answers. They believed that malevolent witches were to blame for their woes and were willing to do anything to protect themselves from harm. Amidst this atmosphere of fear and ignorance, a young woman named Anna came to live in Vardø. She was a healer and midwife who used herbal remedies and traditional methods to help those in need. However, her good deeds were overshadowed by the superstitious beliefs of the townspeople. They viewed her knowledge of healing herbs with suspicion, believing that she was using them to brew harmful potions. As whispers spread through the town, Anna found herself at the center of a brewing controversy. Her reputation was tarnished and she became known as a suspected witch, a mere rumor, but it was enough to set the wheels of suspicion in motion. As rumors swirled, one of Anna's neighbors, a woman named Gunilla Rasmusdatter, fell ill. When she passed away shortly after, the townspeople's fears reached a boiling point. They accused Anna of bewitching Gunilla, believing that she had caused her death through her alleged witchcraft. In a moment of desperation and fear, they turned to the local magistrate, Thomas von der Schulenburg, seeking his intervention. He was a stern man, known for his harsh demeanor and unwavering commitment to upholding the law. He saw this case as a test of his authority and was determined to make an example of Anna. The investigation began and Anna's world crumbled before her eyes. She was arrested and subjected to a series of interrogations, each one more grueling than the last. Her accusers presented their case against her, weaving tales of her supposed involvement in the death of Gunilla, but Anna steadfastly maintained her innocence. She tried to explain that her knowledge of healing was not witchcraft and that she could not control the outcome of people's illnesses, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The villagers' minds were made up and no amount of persuasion could change their minds. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, von Schulenburg chose to press forward with the case. He saw it as his duty to protect his town from the forces of darkness, and he believed that Anna was a threat to the community. As the trial progressed, a sense of hysteria gripped the town. Neighbors turned against one another, each trying to outdo the other in their accusations. It was a classic witch hunt and Vardø was its hunting ground. Soon Anna found herself isolated, with few, if any, coming to her defense. The entire town seemed united in their belief that she was a witch and that she must be punished. Under the weight of their accusations, Anna's resolve began to crumble. She was exhausted from the constant questioning, and the toll it was taking on her both physically and emotionally was immense. She had never intended to harm anyone, and now she was being accused of the very thing she had dedicated her life to opposing. Slowly but surely, she began to doubt herself. Perhaps her knowledge of healing was seen as too strange. Perhaps her intentions were misconstrued. Perhaps she was, as they believed, a witch. Faced with the prospect of a lifetime in prison or death, she decided to confess. She confessed to everything they wanted to hear, implicating herself in the death of Gunilla and naming others who she claimed were involved in witchcraft. This confession was like fuel to the fire. More arrests were made, more accusations were hurled, and the cycle of fear and suspicion grew exponentially. Within a short span of time, the entire town was caught in its grip. The accused confessed under duress, implicating others in an intricate web of deceit and lies. Soon the list of alleged witches grew longer, their crimes more heinous. It was a domino effect, each confession leading to more arrests, creating a terrifying spectacle that left many innocent people at the mercy of a crazed system. It wasn't just the accused who suffered, the entire town was affected by this frenzy. Families were torn apart as husbands accused wives and children turned against parents. Friendships and alliances were broken, all in the name of rooting out witchcraft. Vardø became a battleground where trust was scarce and paranoia ran rampant. But why did the authorities behave this way? What was so important about punishing these women? Well, it comes down to two reasons. First, religious fervor. During this time, Europe was swept up in a wave of religious zeal. People were deeply concerned with the devil's influence in their midst. Any unexplained event was seen as a sign of witchcraft, and those who practiced it were considered enemies of the state. Secondly, social and political unrest. Norway, along with much of Europe, was experiencing significant social and political upheaval. Wars, famines, and plagues had taken their toll. leaving people desperate for a scapegoat. Witches became easy targets, and their persecution offered a temporary distraction from the real issues plaguing society. So what happened next? How were these confessions proven? Well, that's where things get really gruesome. Torture was the order of the day. The accused were subjected to sleep deprivation, beatings, and other forms of physical abuse until they confessed to the charges against them. These confessions were then used as evidence, a clear indication of their guilt. If they didn't confess, further torture was applied until they did. The whole process was designed to extract a confession, regardless of whether the accusations were true or not. One of the most infamous aspects of these trials was the use of swimming to determine a person's guilt or innocence. Known as the water ordeal, this method of testing involved tying the accused up and throwing them into a body of water. If they floated, they were deemed innocent, but if they sank, they were considered guilty and a witch. This may seem absurd, but it was taken very seriously at the time. It was believed that water would reject a witch, and therefore if a person sank, it was proof of their guilt. With the confessions and the water ordeal, the trials moved towards their horrifying climax. Those convicted of witchcraft were sentenced to death. Men and women alike were put to death, their bodies bearing witness to the cruelty of the era. The methods of execution were as painful as they were public, serving as a warning to the rest of the population. One of the most common methods was burning. The condemned were tied to a stake and set ablaze, their screams echoing through the streets of Vardø. Another form of punishment was drowning, where the accused were bound and thrown into a body of water, left to die a slow and agonizing death. When it was over, what followed? What happened to the town of Vardø and those who lived there? Well, the trials left Vardø a shadow of its former self. The once bustling town became a symbol of fear and paranoia. The community was shattered, with many fleeing the town out of fear of being accused. Vardø's population declined significantly, turning its streets into eerie reminders of the atrocities that had unfolded there. The trials also had a lasting impact on those who remained in Vardø. Many lived in constant fear of future accusations, while others were forever scarred by the events they had witnessed. Vardø was the perfect place to hold these trials. The judge was eager to prove himself. The townspeople were gullible and superstitious, and there were few educated people to speak up against it. But it raises the question, why did it stop when it did? Why weren't more people executed? Well, the answer lies in the logistics of such a large operation. The authorities couldn't sustain the pace indefinitely. They needed to conserve resources and maintain a semblance of normalcy in the town. After all, they had to continue trading with Vardø, and executing over 100 people every week wasn't conducive to business. So they simply took a break, regrouped, and waited for another opportunity to strike. Today, the Vardø witch trials serve as a chilling reminder of the dark chapters in human history. They highlight how easily fear and ignorance can lead to unimaginable acts. The story is not just about witchcraft and persecution, but about the dangers of mass hysteria and the importance of critical thinking and compassion. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to watch more episodes like this, please stay tuned. Thanks for watching.